Hi everyone, and welcome to the Greensboro Public Library and our One City, One Book on this dark and stormy night here in Greensboro, North Carolina. One City, One Book. This is our 11th One City, One Book, and the public library and its community partners are asking you to come together and all read the same book. Our book this year is The Carolina Table. 31 essays by North Carolina writers about food. So we have copies for sale thanks to Scuppernong Books in the back, and then we also have copies for checkout at your library branches. And so we'd ask the community through the fall and into the spring to read this book. One of the featured authors in this book is Zelda Lockhart, which is why we are featuring her book at our kickoff tonight. We're very excited about the release of the novel Trinity. So we will have community programs for all ages throughout the community, throughout the fall. We have a cinema series, a series of movies that's starting later this month. You can find all this information out at www.greensborolibrary.org. For those of you who are here in the room tonight, be sure and like our social media. We're almost to 10,000 likes on Facebook, having Facebook. So please, share this program with the community. I also want to mention that on Thursday, October 19th, we welcome 4 chefs, 2 of who are featured in the book, in addition to Sandra Gutierrez, who wrote a book called Latinismo, which features 21 Latin American countries, and also Carla Hall, who was on Top Chef. So that will be October 19th at the Piedmont Hall at the Coliseum Complex. We also have another author coming soon, Paul Quadros, who is one of the authors featured in the book. And on Sunday, October 15th, he will be in this very room here at Central Library. There's lots of other events going on throughout the season, and we really hope you will participate by reading the book and attending events at the library and in the community. I'd like to thank our community partners and those who are members of the Community Engagement Committee, including GTCC. This is their All Community Read book for the year as well. And I also want to thank those of you that are members of the Library Foundation. It is very vitally important to support the library because none of our funding for any supplies or anything like that come from the city. It's all from the foundation. So we really do appreciate those of you that are members of the foundation, and thank you so much for your support. Say hi to everyone, Zelda.
Hey everybody, I feel like I'm tuning in from the space station.
It's my pleasure to introduce Zelda Lockhart. Zelda holds a PhD in Expressive Art Therapies and an MA in Literature, as well as a certificate in Writing, Directing, and Editing from the New York Film Academy. She is the author of many books, including Cold Running Creek, The 100th Turtle, Fifth Born 2, and the book we are featuring here tonight, Trinity. Her fiction, poetry, and essays have appeared in many anthologies. She is the director of Her Story Garden Studios, which we will talk about also, inspiring Black women and girls with to self-define, heal, and liberate through stories and nature. She works as a writer and a speaker. She lives in Durham, North Carolina, and as I mentioned earlier, she is featured in the Carolina Table, and we're also celebrating the release of Trinity. So welcome to Greensboro on this dark and stormy night, Zelda. Thank you for coming. I explained to the audience a little earlier that we are doing this hybrid program because you indeed were ill, but you're on the mend. So thank you for coming in this form.
Thank you so much. And I wish I could be there with you all. I love being with audiences, but this is the next best thing. And we have lots of practice with this. So I'm so excited to be here. And thank you all for coming out. It's storming here too. So let's just keep our fingers crossed that all the technology stays on.
Yes, yes. In talking about Carolina Table and that project, where 31 essayists were brought together by the late North Carolina writer and editor Randall Keenan. Tell me how you got involved with that project and a little about that.
Yeah, so Randall was a friend of mine, spiritually is a friend of mine, and at that time, Randall had just finished doing a read from me of Fifth One to the 100th Turtle, and then, creating a blurb and everything to go on the back. And then Randall asked if I would be interested, in being part of this lovely project. And I was like, of course, because we're both two country kids, so Randall knew that I had been doing a lot of gardening that turned into farming in my space, and we both lived in Hillsboro. And so just, we had a lot of things that were similar in terms of what we were up to and with our love of the land. And so Randall knew that I would be somebody who would say absolutely about writing an essay for this project.
And you really do talk about, in your writings, about the healing power of the land.
Mm-hmm. That for me, we, like, nature is inside of us and outside of us, and we are inextricably linked to it, but in so many ways we get separated by it so much by the other system that we live in. So we live in a system of capitalism, and a lot of times that keeps us separate. We have to be inside for a 9 to 5 for an abnormal amount of time every day, and just all of the things that make it so that we end up with some separation from it. So in all of the work I do, my writing, everything is just very integral to me, to when I need healing or even when I don't, just for play, to be able to be outside and connected to the outdoors as much as possible so that I can have the food and the medicine and the kinship that I need, which is the same thing that I say about writing, that your writing is food, medicine, and kinship. So for me, they're just, they're all in one ecology. So yes, being outdoors, being with nature.
Is that what inspired you to start Her Story Garden Studios?
I started Her Story Garden Studios. I had been doing writing workshops in my home wherever I lived, and then I moved to North Carolina about 22 years ago, and then I started farming more, which is what that story is about, actually, in Carolina Table.
Yes.
So I started wanting to do more of what I felt like my grandparents had done in terms of just the beauty of growing food and being with food that you have grown and picked right out of the ground in order to nourish your body. And then once I started doing that, and I was with the women at the studio, it became just really a part of everything that we did, because I would always say at least 3 things from the garden have to go into every meal. And then since then, I've added so many other, with intention, added so many different elements to the work. Like we do foraging, like a foraging workshop. Usually once per year, there's a cooking workshop that's about bringing in the food, bringing in the bounty of your environment and being able to cook based on the seasons and things like that. And then going camping and anything that can just sort of help you stay connected to land.
Yeah, I love your philosophy of making art, being in nature, eating well, and I love rest too. That's so important in this day and age. And writing is healing. Zelda's essay in the Carolina Table is called The Garden Gate. Would you perhaps mind just reading a little short section of it? It ties in so nicely with Trinity.
Yeah, it most certainly does. So I'll read you just the very beginning, so you get a little flavor of what how the essay feels and sounds, and how the time, space, and sensory details of the piece. I'll just read you a couple of paragraphs in the opening. It might take my sweet time, but I was going to build myself a garden fence to keep the deer out of the quarter acre that I planned to till and plant and harvest. It was my first spring since returning down south, back home after living under the gray, colorless winters of a New York State sky. I moved to North Carolina to find a piece of land, learn how to grow vegetables, and farm the way my grandparents did. The line of trees just beyond the fruit trees on my land felt to me like somebody had planted down there before. Just below a perfect line of apple, pear, and fig trees was a field where nothing but milkweed grew. It was familiar to my blood, my home, the South. While I was tilling the soil, I could taste the sweet corn like my granddaddy grew. I fantasized that I would find arrowheads, then took back that fantasy, since it would mean that I was fantasizing retrospective war. I enjoyed the dirt beneath my nails.
And then you go into some lessons for us all, which are wonderful in your essay. It's so true about the earth and where you come from. I mean, my family's from Georgia Red Clay. We were in South Georgia, and you really, when I go back there for a family reunion, it speaks to you, that home within the earth. Yeah. I really, and another thing, I guess, kind of transitioning into Trinity, Trinity really is sort of writing the spirit home. Trinity has just been released. It opens, and I'll be honest with you, Zelda, it was hard to get through the first few chapters. There were some triggers in there for me personally, and there were, it was a little difficult to read and get through. But it really, I love the way you did the prologue and had the ancestors who just willfully forfeit, kind of forfeit the legacy, but there's that hope too that, that basically there's a passage at the very beginning that involves the capture of slaves in Ghana.
Do you want me to read it?
Oh, sure.
I can read it.
Yeah, and then while you're finding it out, and then so there's this opening passage in the prologue that really, it sets up a tragedy, but then there's this thread of hope through unborn women. Does that sound good setup? Yeah.
So I want to accept that and do a sort of a bit of a reset of it. So the prologue, yes, the capture of people is one of the things that happens in there. But what I want the audience on Facebook, the ones that are there in the audience, one of the things that I want you all to do and to consider has to do with what Beth just said, is that the ways in which the story impacted Beth. Like, I want you to not separate yourself from the story. So when you're listening, and I'm going to read a little bit, I want you to consider and allow yourself as a human to feel and open up to the ways in which this human story is connected to you as a human being. And the reason why that's so important is because the story starts with not people capturing slaves. It starts with helping us to understand the beginnings of human separation, of diasporatized, of people being diasporatized. And us being diasporatized and separated as human beings, as you know, we're one species, but then that sort of nonsense that occurred, that within this species, we are different. That some people are superior, some people are inferior, some people, we know that all of that's nonsense, but we're so gaslit with it that it's difficult for us to break out of it. And then that we're also so benefiting from it in ways that we think we're benefiting, but it's for our long-term demise is upon us. So what the book, when it opens, this spirit who is speaking, who is telling the story, who later does come into the story, embody, is offering us sort of the story of the removal and the separation of what happened to the first woman. Okay, so I'll read you a little bit. When the black bodies have let go and the spirits exist, they are able to come to folks and tell them of all the mistakes made in the flesh and lessons learned after the flesh. They are able to know life without time, without the limitations of the body, the pains of the mind. But what good is all their knowing unless someone with hands and feet and flesh and bone can make right what has for so long been wrong? I didn't know that's what I was being called to do, but by the time I was 6 years old, I knew that what I was experiencing about living and what other people were experiencing were different dimensions of remembering. I saw my great-great-grandmother's capture as the sun rose across the sun-hardened earth of the Congo. Having been chased out of her village, she ran. White men, just after she pounded her cassava and plantain flour to make fufu and swatted the morning flies, the heel bones of her feet pounded on the hardened clay. She carried in her womb two precious things. One was the stories of every villager since the first tree sprouted from the first seed. The other precious thing she carried was the untamed, untainted seeds of her children. So there's some of that. And with that, throughout the whole book, you get that the connection of that red clay that we have here in North Carolina, where so much of the book is set. We have it in Mississippi, where so much of the book is set. We have it in Ghana, where so much of the book is set. That clay that makes the back of your mouth water when you think about home. Yeah.
You take us through the different generations. I think the 1939 and Old Daddy or Old Diddy and Lottie and a marriage of an older man and a child that's 50 years younger than the husband, and you know, and through there's a lot of abandonment, and there's a lot of domestic violence, a lot of anger based on the trauma, the systemic trauma within the generations. You know, it's the Institute of Women's Policy and Research has said that about 31% of all women experience domestic violence, but for Black women, that statistic is more like 40%. And I think, you know, I'm glad you put it in the book. I'm glad you put it in the book the way you did, because it's complicated, you know, because even Benjamin, the son of this, he starts out innocent, and this lovely young boy who likes to fish, and he starts out so innocent, and then he repeats the cycle within the next generation. So, so talk a little bit about how you came up with these characters. Are they, they're very deep and they're very rich. I know them now. I know them now. How did they come about?
Yeah, so I want to talk about two things. So one, so colonization, and then it's wielding arm, it's a mechanical arm that keeps it going, which is capitalism, has impacted and wounded all humans on the entire planet. That didn't used to be true. It used to be that you couldn't say all humans on the entire planet, but now you can. So all humans on the entire planet are impacted negatively by capitalism and by colonization. And now some of those, some groups of people, whether they're benefiting or not, there's different kinds of abuse that happens in all of our families, right? And it's not always where we can physically, see it occurring. There's all kinds of pains that happen. So this story is not about, I'm just, showing y'all a whole bunch of people getting beat up.
Not at all.
Yeah, the story is about, it takes the microcosm of one family who's going through their own trials and tribulations with the same thing that all of us are going through. And we get to look at how it manifests in this one family and how the family is trying all kinds of different strategies of love. There's as much love in the book as there is, because the attempts at loving are trying to push the violence out. The violence was transmuted from colonization all the way through the genetics of the family, which is what the South is suffering from for extremist white people. Everybody falls in different places on the gamut.
And I would say war too, but both. Yeah, I would say war both in Ghana and then also in both with the Korean and Vietnam War too, as backdrops in the book too. To that, but that also goes to colonization and capitalism.
Exactly. So the men in the family, just like in all of our families, are trying different strategies to get out of their situation. The military is almost a strategy that so many Southern youth try. I mean, these days they come to the high school when the kids are 16. The recruiters come, especially if they know that they're in an area where the parents might not be able to afford college. But there's military, the church, other forms of so the education system. So we have all of these same things that are tried and not true. So we have all of that going on. So that's to talk a little bit about how it is that they're in this very poetic and colorful novel, and that you've got violence and you've got love and you've got pain all happening at the same time. And
I love the device that so there's a lot of men in the book, but there is also, you carry on, I guess, the plot device of the unborn child. I like that bringing the female progeny on, but yet she remains unborn as the generations come down the line.
Yeah, until.
And we won't say, we'll let the reader read more about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I will say, you asked me about the characters, so I don't sit down and say, let me get some characters about anything, and I want to caution people not to do that when you write. Just express yourself about what's going on in your life, and then it'll all pan out. So I was doing an exercise with some folks I was writing with, some women who I was writing with, and I was using the Soul of the Full-Length manuscript, so that's this book. So that's, one of my books that helps you to sort of write from your heart and soul. And one of the exercises that's deep in, I do not recommend trying this until you've gone through a lot of personal plot exercises. One of the exercises that's deep in, after a writer or participant with the book has gone backwards from what is it that's bothering me in my everyday life right now, and then when did I feel that before, and then when did I want something similar before, and going all the way back to the first time that they can remember that, and that finding that wounding event that caused them to want what they want. And then by this time in the exercises, I have people write the wounding event of the perpetrator of their wounds. So by that time they've had so much time with their own wounding and the gifts that have come of it, that they are able to spend some time asking that question. And for me, I decided to, because I always write with folks when I'm writing, to explore with my father. Because my father was he was abusive, so he was my abuser, but then he was also, like, I always saw this little boy in him, who loved to fish, and he was funny, and so I wanted to hang out with him, but I also was scared of him, and, it's all of those dichotomies. And so one of the things that I work with in the book, that I work with people about, is if you tell all the truths, not just in your family, tell the ones that people want to most hear, and they're fun, and they make y'all look real good. But also in your family, if you tell about the missing people, if you tell about the painful thing that happened that caused Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so to behave the way that they do, then you can heal better from your own behaviors and your own wounding, and not accidentally carry it forward, because you know the source of the wounds. And so that's what started that first chapter. My dad was born in outside of Jackson, Mississippi in 1929, and the book opens in 1939 when the main character is 10 years old. And my grandmother Lottie, I found out from my mom that she left them often. So I drew on those truths to try and write what I felt like must have been his wounding events. Yeah.
Going back to our talk earlier about land.
Yeah.
And how, I'm so thankful that I read the whole book, because you really do, a lot. So in Benny's generation, he marries a woman named Rebecca and has a child named BJ, and then there's a girl child named Lottie Rebecca, right? Yeah, Lottie Rebecca, and so at the end, but I think, and you talk a little bit about land deeds and finding the going back and being that history detective to claim what's rightfully belongs to the family, which is it's just wonderful. Won't give the ending away, but is there a passage you'd like to read, maybe from that part of the book? That won't give too much away, or about The importance of land, I mean, because land is wealth. I mean, land is, you know, is wealth.
Yeah, but that's the mistake.
Yeah.
That's the mistake, is the belief that land is
Well, yeah.
is wealth. It isn't. And it's the undoing of that, you know, if you can undo that, then you're gonna be all right, you know. Yeah, because isn't that what the wars are about? Somebody made it up that if you can possibly possess what is a part of your actual ecology, and you can somehow possess it, and build fences around it, and do all of these things that actually cut it off from the rest of its ecology, then somehow you will have wealth. What you actually have is ignorance when you do that. But that's a whole other, that's a long, yeah, that's something to talk about. I could preach a sermon on that one. But what I want to, so it's complicated, right? Because if you're trying to get out, of the thing that's got you caught, you know, if you're trying to get out of the ways in which capitalism and colonization has you in a chokehold, then what members of society do is to try to get whatever the people who have them in the chokehold have, right? Figuring if I have what they have, then maybe I'll get out of the chokehold. So land, then, and ownership of land, it can be hecka complicated for brown people who have had, you know, been displaced, I'll put it that way, as opposed to land stolen from them, been displaced. Because then in a lot of ways, the land becomes the thing that abuses you, but it's also the thing that heals you, right? So I'm going to read you one paragraph that exemplifies that. So, so the main character in part one of the book, Benjamin, so Benny, he ends up, you know, fighting in South Korea, and his life is complicated. I won't tell you all the things that go on with him. And he does start out this beautiful little boy, and then you get to see and be part of how it is that that he becomes how he is. But he does go and fights in South Korea, which is also complicated. But this is just one paragraph of him coming home. So we're talking about home as land and you know, Mississippi, and that's my birthplace too. Flying into Jackson. Well, first of all, Sampson, Mississippi, 1953. Flying into Jackson, the terrain beneath Benny changed from Midwest barren, flat crop circles of green, brown, beige, to the southern thickness of nappy green trees. The sweet wine smell of home brought him back. The high-pitched scream of the landing plane connected sky to ground, making Benjamin Lee, Private Benjamin Lee, one of the crops again. Tobacco, cotton, sugarcane, nigger. So that's enough that little paragraph is enough to give you some of that complicated, you know, on the one hand, you know, and on the other hand. And I know so many people who are, you know, I say, you know, woman, help you start a garden? And they say, no, why would I do that? You know, for them, it's just like that exemplifies something of poverty. It's like, why would I do that? I can go to Whole Foods. It's like, well, yeah, you can, but the more you separate yourself from your food, the older the nutrients are, and the more the nutrients die before they can come into your body. So anyway, there's all of these complications and complicated relationships that we have with land and home. And in this book, we get to see the family figure it out and grapple with it, especially some of the last mother character in the book, and the beauty of what she's trying to do with land. And then we also get the last daughter character in the book, so as not to give too much away. Yeah.
It's wonderful. I think, boy, now we will segue into some questions, and we're going to start with the Facebook audience. Are there any questions, Amy?
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment? Okay. Well, good. Well, I want to thank those of you who did live stream on Facebook, and I think we're going to end that portion and continue our conversation here at the Greensboro Public Library. You can find all sorts of information out at www.greensborolibrary.org about all the events going on for One City, One Book through the fall and into the new year. Lots of great programming coming up. One thing I'll mention briefly is March 7th, 2024, we will have Dr. Jessica B. Harris here, who wrote the book High on the Hog. So coming to Greensboro. So thank you, and thank you, Facebook audience. So